The voicemail lasted only 7 seconds. There was no greeting, no explanation, just the sound of heavy breathing, a metallic clank in the background, and a voice that sounded as if it were speaking from the bottom of a well. Then the caller whispered 3 words. "He's still running." The message arrived years after the hijacking, years after the headlines faded, years after investigators had packed away photographs, witness statements, and theories that led nowhere. For most people, the case was already dead, but for one FBI agent, those 3 words felt like a door, quietly opening in a room that everyone thought had been sealed forever. And behind that door was a man who had vanished into the world. The hijacking had unfolded so smoothly that some passengers didn't realize what was happening until it was already over. There had been no screaming, no dramatic confrontation, no panicked rush toward the exits. Just a calm man in an ordinary jacket who handed a note to a flight attendant and watched her face drain of color. The aircraft changed course shortly afterward. Hours later, the hijacker disappeared with a fortune in ransom money, leaving behind confused witnesses and a mystery that would haunt investigators for decades. What made the case terrifying wasn't the violence, it was the precision. Every move appeared rehearsed. Every instruction seemed calculated. Witnesses remembered his voice, but couldn't agree on his accent. They remembered his face, but described different men. It was as if he had walked onto that plane already prepared to become a ghost. When the investigation exploded across international headlines, authorities expected an arrest within days. Instead, the trail ended abruptly. Like footprints stopping in the middle of fresh snow, the FBI assembled a task force that sifted through thousands of leads. Tips flooded in from across the country. Neighbors reported suspicious men. Former coworkers claimed they recognized the sketch. Anonymous callers offered names that led nowhere. Every week seemed to produce another promising lead, and every week ended with disappointment. The hijacker remained invisible. As months became years, agents developed an unhealthy relationship with the case. Some carried copies of the suspect sketch in their briefcases. Others pinned photographs to walls in their homes. Retirement parties came and went. Careers ended. New agents inherited old files, yet the mystery remained untouched. Somewhere out there, a man had stolen an aircraft, humiliated authorities, and disappeared without leaving a trace. It felt impossible, and that was exactly what made it unforgettable. The first strange break came from a forgotten storage box. During an evidence review, an analyst discovered documents that had never been fully examined. Buried among them was a witness statement that seemed insignificant at first glance. One passenger recalled hearing the hijacker mention a city overseas during a brief conversation. Investigators had dismissed it decades earlier because no supporting evidence existed. But technology had changed. Records once scattered across continents could now be compared within minutes. Analysts began revisiting old assumptions. Travel manifests, immigration documents, banking activity, and archived intelligence reports were pulled from databases around the world. Tiny fragments started aligning in ways no one expected. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed the outline of a path leading far beyond American borders. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the story became. Several identities appeared connected to the same pattern. Different names, different birth, different passports, yet photographs revealed similarities that were difficult to ignore. The ears matched, the jawline matched. Even old injuries appeared consistent. It looked as though someone had spent years constructing entirely new lives whenever attention drifted too close. One particular identity drew scrutiny. According to official records, the man had died years earlier overseas. The death certificate appeared legitimate. Local authorities had accepted it without question. The file should have ended there. Yet certain details refused fit. There were missing signatures, contradictory statements, witnesses who couldn't remember attending the funeral. The death seemed real on paper, but strangely absent in memory. Investigators began asking a dangerous question. What if the dead man wasn't dead at all? The search expanded into countries where records were incomplete, and corruption often complicated investigations. Agents traveled thousands of miles chasing rumors whispered in crowded markets and aging apartment buildings. Some leads collapsed immediately. Others led to men who looked remarkably similar before proving unrelated. Every near miss deepened the frustration. Then came a photograph. It was taken casually at a community gathering overseas. Dozens of people stood smiling beneath faded decorations. Nothing appeared unusual, yet one face near the edge of the frame froze investigators in place. The man was older now. His hair had changed. His posture had changed, but something about his eyes felt hauntingly familiar. Experts spent weeks comparing images. The probability calculations kept returning the same answer. The man in the photograph might be the fugitive everyone believed had vanished forever. Surveillance began quietly. Authorities couldn't afford mistakes. If they moved too soon, the suspect could disappear again. The man lived an unremarkable life. He bought groceries, spoke with neighbors, walked familiar streets. Nothing about him suggested he had once become one of the most wanted men connected to an aviation crime. Yet small inconsistencies emerged. He never discussed his past in detail. He changed subjects whenever certain years were mentioned. He avoided cameras despite having no obvious reason to fear them. Most telling of all, he maintained contact with individuals whose histories intersected suspiciously with the aftermath of the hijacking. The connections were indirect, fragile, and circumstantial, but together they formed a pattern investigators could no longer ignore. As evidence accumulated, and international operations slowly took shape, FBI agents coordinated with foreign authorities, intelligence services, and prosecutors. Every step required secrecy. One leak could destroy years of work. The suspect had survived this long because he understood how investigations worked. Underestimating him would be catastrophic. Meanwhile, the man appeared completely unaware of the storm gathering around him. He attended local events, shared meals with friends, laughed during conversations. Observers described him as kind and reserved. That contrast disturbed investigators. The image didn't match the criminal they had imagined for decades. It raised unsettling questions. Had they found the wrong person? Or had they discovered something even stranger, a fugitive who had successfully transformed himself into someone new? Then everything nearly fell apart. A confidential source delivered information that shattered the investigation's central theory. According to newly uncovered records, the hijacker may never have escaped with the ransom at all. The documents suggested another individual had secretly benefited from the crime. If true, agents had spent years hunting the wrong man while the real mastermind remained hidden. The revelation triggered panic inside the task force. Analysts re-examined evidence from the beginning. Interviews were reviewed, financial trails were reconstructed. Assumptions that had survived for decades suddenly appeared fragile. For a brief moment, the case seemed ready to collapse under its own weight. The suspect overseas watched television, walked the same streets, and lived his ordinary life, unaware that the investigation was hanging by a thread. The breakthrough arrived from a source nobody expected. A decades-old recording recovered from archived evidence. Modern audio analysis extracted details investigators couldn't hear when the tape was first collected. Hidden beneath background noise was a voice, pattern, subtle, imperfect, but measurable. When analysts compared that pattern to covert recordings gathered during surveillance overseas, the room fell silent. The match wasn't merely strong, it was overwhelming. The same speech habits, the same vocal signatures, the same unconscious pauses between words. Decades separated the recordings, yet the voice belonged to the same man. Suddenly, the competing theories collapsed. The suspect wasn't a victim of mistaken identity. He wasn't a random look. He was the ghost investigators had been chasing all along. The arrest happened without drama. No chase through crowded streets. No gunfire. No desperate escape attempt. Authorities approached him calmly. Witnesses later recalled how ordinary the moment looked. The elderly man seemed confused at first, then resigned. As agents identified themselves and explained the charges, something changed in his expression. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. The full truth emerged during the final stages of the investigation. The hijacker had escaped overseas using a carefully constructed network of false identities. He had manipulated records, exploited international gaps in communication, and even helped create the illusion of his own death. For years, people believed the mystery endured because the evidence was weak. In reality, the mystery endured because he had been extraordinarily disciplined. He spent decades looking over his shoulder, building new lives whenever old questions got too close. And in the end, it wasn't a dramatic confession or a lucky break that exposed him. It was patience. Thousands of forgotten details, gathered across decades, finally pointing to the same man.